One of the things I often teach those leaders when they call me and say, should I hire this agency or how should we think about our marketing spend, is to get really clear on one of three things. The metrics, the goals you need to have accomplished, give those to the agency and then get out of the way. Because if you knew the answer to how to get there, you would already be doing it. You don't. So stop pretending like you do and don't control sort of every time I have to change a knob. Let us run and hold us accountable to the goals. The other way is hire an agency or a marketer for a very specifically defined project that has an outcome you're looking for. It might not be business target, but sometimes it will. Or the third is admit to the whole room you don't know and pay for the thinking to get to a place where you have a really good hypothesis in the same way that you put together pro forma on your financial statements. To say, based on what we know, these are the sort of funnel economics we think can hold up in the marketing funnel. But the truth is nobody in the room knows for sure because we don't have any historical. But let's at least work against these assumptions and stay really close. And I think honestly, agencies don't have an abundant enough mindset to sort of stop the train with clients to say, oh, you're getting ready to give me money. I'm really excited about that. Let me just take that as fast as I can. Versus saying, let's like slow down for a hot minute and get really clear about which one of these three scenarios are you.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
You ever think about the openness you have across your culture? The openness of financial numbers is one level, but also the openness of conversation. What we're really talking about is not just openness, but it's transparency. One of the top articles I've written for Inc. magazine has been about radical transparency. When you think about your transparency in the organization, would you say that it's radical, remarkable, barely there? How would you describe that level of transparency? In other words, where do you draw the line? Most fast growth leaders draw the line at where they're legally allowed to share that information. They don't share salary numbers, but they share nearly everything else. And they have conversations about nearly everything in the organization because they believe in the power of transparency for connection and trust. Today, we have a very special guest. We have the founder of Element 3. They're a 6-time Inc. list ranking company. They were on the list most recently in 2019 at 4,125. Really fast growth over the years. But the one reason behind that, and I talked to the founder of this, her name is Tiffany Sauder, about this, is transparency. Transparency was such a critical element to how she wanted to move the business, how they move forward. I say all that to you with a smile because I really love this conversation around transparency. Being fully transparent is something I think of as leader that you must have. So when you think about transparency, listen into this episode. Listen for the courage she has to share all of herself, not just some. Now, if you haven't already checked out the training we have for leaders for fast growth companies about the 3 mistakes to create the kind of team that you really want, to create A players and track the top talent and create a strong culture in the organization, I walk you through not only the 3 biggest mistakes, but how you can fix them. And you can get that training at genehammett.com/training. Very simple. But what you would get when you come into that is a very succinct way to look at some of the mistakes that are very common across the companies that I talk to on all the time. And you will get the actual specifics behind how do you move forward through that? How do you recognize some of these errors of ways? Go to genehammett.com/training. Hi, Tiffany. How are you?
Hi, great, Gene.
Excited to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. It's fun to be here.
Well, I've already let our audience know a little bit about you at a personal level and what you stand for as a leader, but tell us about Element 3.
Yeah, so Element 3, we're a marketing consultancy HQ'd in Indianapolis, and we work with companies that really are in a growth moment. Sometimes that's of their own choosing, meaning they've made a strategic acquisition, they're wanting to go after a new industry. Sometimes it's, I would say, an uninvited moment of growth where maybe a competitor has made a move and they're trying to sort of react to that. But love working with culture-minded leaders that have really exciting and aggressive sort of moves they want to make for their brand and their business. And helping them build go-to-market strategies at scale to support that.
So this is probably one of the best podcasts for that, because we tailor the content to those leaders that want to grow fast. And so excited to have you on the show.
Thank you very much.
We were talking about, being a fast growth company. You made the Inc. 5000 multiple times. I don't have it in front of me, but you've made it like consistently across the years, 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. How is that possible?
Well, we also, at the beginning of this, we're talking, it really was about focus. What I observed about this industry is that underneath $1 million in like sort of top line revenue, there's just a gajillion of them. Like, a couple of people who have some type of a creative or web design or sort of digital background that set up a shingle, but really we're not running businesses of growth for businesses of growth. And my background is in finance. And so I really looked at this as a business opportunity. I've sort of since curated certainly a marketing minded brand. But I really was like, I think that it's odd that as agencies, we promise growth, but we really don't demonstrate the proof of concept in our own walls. And I have a spiel that I talk to agencies and really try to scold them on. You really don't believe the cough syrup works if you're not spending your own money and energy building a growth engine for yourself. And so we've invested really early in our own sales and marketing team, brand management, and really experimenting with our own resources. And, like a lot of things, if you set out to be good and you don't quit over a really long period of time, you start to work the kinks out. So that really was the sort of business basis that built this into a growth company.
Well, I can appreciate that, because I've worked with a lot of companies like yourself, and they lack that focus, and they overemphasize and this is just my personal opinion, the awards in the system, right? The things that recognize their quality or creative work is important, but are they truly getting the results that our clients need? And I would imagine that part of what you're doing at Element 3 is looking at those results and how what you do translates into an ROI.
Yeah, I think too many times we learn the industry from ourselves. I had a mantra early on that was, I'm not going to spend time with people who can't spend money with me, which means 15 years in, I have remarkably few relationships really in the marketing space. My my network is really all in the business community. And so listening clearly to like, what does my end consumer really want from an agency? How do we construct ourselves in a way that is lean and mean in the places we need to be and is adding sort of premium value in the other places? And yeah, results is a big piece of that.
Well, I want to dive into what does it take for you as a leader, because you kind of jokingly said, it's one thing to grow a business, it's another one to run it. What have you learned, maybe the hard way, as the most important elements of running a business?
Yeah, I have learned, we were talking earlier, I read books and then sort of summarize them into very simple things I can remember. And one of them, it was a Jim Collins book, and he talks about this thing called bullets than cannons. And essentially it talks about do something small before you do, sort of expend all your resources into a big cannon, and then you don't have any gunpowder left over to calibrate. And I would say early on, we got lucky with a couple cannons that we fired. And so my belief was launching cannons wins new marketplaces. And so we not only, I would say, got to a place where our culture was very tired of assembling and launching cannons, and sort of the reverberation that came from that. But when you're even big companies, you can run out of money faster that way. And so I think one of the things I've learned now that we're bigger is being more disciplined in the size of effort that we initially launch, and how do we pressure test some of our early assumptions. And I really had to, I would say, back into that lesson. I wasted a lot of money launching cannons that probably could have been bullets that would have told me earlier that that's not a good place to sort of, bark up that tree.
Every leader listening in here can relate to wasting money on something. And marketing is usually one of the areas where we waste money and we wish we had it back. No offense, Tiffany.
Yeah. Um, do you want me to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, as I've gotten closer into like we talked about YPO, Young Professionals President's Organization is a group I'm part of. And one of the things I often teach those leaders when they call me and say, should I hire this agency or how should we think about our marketing spend, is to get really clear on one of three things: the metrics, the goals you need to have accomplished, give those to the agency, and then get out of the way. Because if you knew the answer to how to get there, you would already be doing it. You don't. So stop pretending like you do, and don't control sort of every time I have to change a knob. Let us run and hold us accountable to the goals. The other way is hire an agency or market for a very specifically defined project that has an outcome you're looking for. It might not be business goal target, but some type of goal. Or the third is admit to the whole room you don't know, and pay for the thinking to get to a place where you have a really good hypothesis, in the same way that you put together pro forma on your financial statements, to say, based on what we know, these are the sort of funnel economics we think can hold up in the marketing funnel. But the truth is nobody in the room knows for sure because we don't have any historical. But let's at least work against these assumptions and stay really close. And I think honestly, agencies don't have an abundant enough mindset to sort of stop the train with clients to say, oh, you're getting ready to give me money. I'm really excited about that. Let me just take that as fast as I can. Versus saying, let's like slow down for a hot minute and get really clear about which one of these three scenarios are you.
I really appreciate that, because even in the way I spend money with my marketing consultants, it's a version of one of these three, and you're exactly right. Tiffany, I want to get back to running the business. So some of the hardest parts of business is really understanding the people and having a connection with the people. One of the things that my team has researched with Element 3 and you specifically is your belief in the importance of transparency. So what does transparency look like in your organization?
Yeah, so I think there's kind of two sides to the transparency coin for us. One is open book financials. So I would say transparency in the financial side of the company. And the other piece is transparency in the strategies, like the softer side of what are we doing? Why did we make that decision? How did we come to it? What were the options? And where do we land? And what's the sort of, why should everybody get behind it? So I would say we have transparency on both sides, but I'll spend a minute or so on the financial side. What I've learned is that a lot of times people ask me, well, does that mean you share everything? Like you publish salaries? Like, no, that's not productive. We don't share salaries across the organization, but really everything else is shared. We also, I would, if someone's thinking about this, don't make sure it has context around it. Most people, if they see a P&L laying on your desk, don't understand inherently how to read it. And so it's not just about showing them the numbers, but making sure that the organization understands what is the story the numbers are telling us, not only about our performance over the last 30 days, but what are the leading indicators that we can see in some of the decisions that we're making? And are we winning or are we losing? And being really transparent about that. I read a book a long time ago called The Great Game of Business, and Jack Stack speaks to there is no ignorance. There is no security in ignorance. And in our industry, if you're in it for very long, you've either been part of a RIF, a big layoff, you've had a friend that had. We're not known for our financial stability, because when a big client goes away, so goes those resources. And so it really was a way of gaining trust with the talent that I bring in here of, I'm not going to surprise you. I'm not going to lie to you. That I'm not going to promise you we're never going to have a layoff, or we're not going to have to make some right sizing decisions off of losing a client. But you're going to know pretty close to the same time I do. So that was a real, I think, important part of, as I was an unknown leader coming into an industry that I had no experience in, it was part of the way that I was uniquely willing to try to sort of win and compete for talent.
Hold on for a second. Tiffany's been talking about transparency. What I want you to think about is one company that has done this really well is Hubspot. They're a marketing technology company, and they went public in 2014. They went public, and their level of growth allowed them to get to this point, and they realized that once they're a public company, they can no longer be as open or transparent as they were in the past without making some critical decisions. One of those decisions is who is a designated insider, who's on the inside, who's on the outside. This company believed in transparency so much that they requested that every employee be a designated insider. It's a really strong choice. It's a very bold move, but the payoff, everyone felt like an owner. I share this story with you because I share it from the stage when I'm out there talking to organizations to give a perspective of how far you could go to have fully transparent leadership. Hopefully you'll take this into account when you think about your transparency. Back to the interview with Tiffany. The other part of transparency is about the people and the conversations you're having. Give us an idea of where you draw that line.
Yeah, you're saying in like talent development or just across the board?
Yeah, just the kind of conversations beyond money.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty transparent in my own journey of leadership. I mean, I was 25 years old. I joke when I got the title of president, I looked more like an account executive. And so I've learned a real big part of keeping people on this bumpy road with me because being on the Inc. 5000 6 years in a row, I mean, that doesn't happen. It all looks glamorous on a sort of chart, but it's like you hit your head on the ceiling a few times. And so just being really candid about things I missed, things I underestimated, disciplines that we did maybe unknowingly early that we let go, like sort of go away because nobody was watching it. We didn't understand that was such a big part of the success formula and kind of having to rebuild part of that. And even on the personal front, I mean, I don't know, maybe there are people who have started businesses mostly from scratch. I'm married for 15 years. My husband has a big career. Growing this business has been nuts. We've got 3 kids with 1 on the way. Like, I mean, things are crazy. And so we've gotten out of whack, my husband and I, where our marriage crashed into the wall, and not in the middle of it was I transparent with the company about that. But once we work through it, being really transparent about, like, guys, I made some sacrifices personally that are not sustainable. And here's what I learned along the way. I feel like I have a responsibility to teach that part of what it looks like to be successful, because I think people can glamorize how good we are at making decisions as CEOs. When it was like, you didn't see it because my job is not to bring that to work, but I blew it in some areas personally. And I want to share those blemishes with you too, so that my people who work for me don't make the same mistake.
Tiffany, what I feel from you saying this is you have the courage to be vulnerable when necessary with your team.
I hope they would say that. I feel like it's a little narcissistic to sort of say it about myself, but I think it's a cathartic part of the learning journey of being an entrepreneur for me. I think it gives purpose to the battle scars for me. I think it holds me accountable to internal decisions that I've made when I say it out loud. So I think all of that is sort of part of my sort of, I don't know, thing.
Well, I want to go back to this. You said something about the disciplines that maybe let go of them. And I think I heard too early. Is there some discipline that you were doing in the early days that you had to bring back?
Yeah. One was around, like, I mean, and I think this is still the most critical number for most businesses, but in mine, we don't necessarily have 10-year contracts with the government that never expire. You know, we're fighting every 30 days for revenue. And so at the beginning, I was just obsessed. Like, our revenue number was the most important number to me. I knew if I kept my revenue above my expense number, I at least lived to fight another day. And if I got enough days, I just felt like I could figure this thing out, you know? And it was just my obsession. And it was I focused on the number. I talked about the number as I started getting account people underneath me. Every single week we talked about the number. Like, I just never let it get out of my sight. And then once I became an executive and had people underneath me, and we'd hit our marks more than we'd missed them, the discipline kind of got sloppy. Like, it was like, well, that's kind of an automatic part of the way that we do business. And so then revenue started getting super lumpy, which starts to mess up cash flow and all that kind of thing. And it was like that one discipline that seemed almost like an invisible habit that slowly worked its way out of the company. Once we recaptured that, it was like everything changed again. And so I think we didn't understand that we decided it, because it was just sort of this like nagging obsession in my head in the early days. And it was not like I was like, you know what I'm going to decide to do? I'm going to put in a revenue process that we're going to closely manage. I never said that to myself. But once we got to the place where we saw this is broken, how do we fix it? We realized it was an old discipline, not something new that we had to create that was going to fix the problem that we had. So that is an example for us.
Now hold on for one more moment. Tiffany just said she was obsessed with revenue, and it was a discipline that she had gotten away from. What is the discipline you've gotten away from? What is the discipline that allowed you to get to where you are, but for some reason it faded away? Did it fade away because you lost interest in it, or because it wasn't working any longer at a bigger organization? I want you to really be intentional about this, because a lot of times we forget what got us here and really forget some of the key things. Tiffany shared the story about how that has been important for her business to have that focus on revenue. Your numbers might be something different that you focus on. Maybe it's not even the numbers. Maybe it's just a discipline that you wish you could bring back. I'm giving you permission to consider that right now as a leader. Now back to the interview with Tiffany. I want to ask you one kind of personal question in this journey of leadership you've had. You've probably learned some things the hard way. What's a moment that you would call an inflection point where you had to let go of a previous approach for yourself or a thinking belief in leadership that allowed you to be the leader you are today?
Yeah, there's been several, but I think that I mentioned to you when we were just chatting before this that we went all in on kind of a business management system called EOS. And people talk about like, you're going to hit your ceiling and you're not good at everything. And I'm like, yeah, okay, sure. But that process of going through getting really clear about what are the things that I have a chance to be the best in the world at, and how do I get everything else off my plate? And you kind of have, I think when you're an entrepreneur early, you almost have to tell yourself, I'm pretty good at most things, to like give yourself the courage to do all the things you're bad at or believe you can get. And as I started to put people in roles that had a chance to be the best in the world at that thing, I started to see an acceleration in the business like we haven't experienced. And I would also say a calmness in the business, because there wasn't this volatility of new ideas, which is both my blessing and personal curse. So that was a big lesson. And they use the language letting go of the vine, really getting out of somebody's way and letting them go through failure cycles on their own to get to a place where I could see what outcomes do their decisions lead to, and being totally comfortable with it being a different path than one that I might see or chart.
Let me break in here for a second. If you're listening on YouTube, make sure that you go ahead and give us a thumbs up if you like this content. Subscribe, hit the bell notification. We'd love to have you come back and listen to more of this content. Make sure that you can do it now. Well, Tiffany, I really appreciate you being here. One final question. How do you as a leader take moments to step back and create time to think about the people in the organization?
Yeah, this is I think, interesting question. I've always, I actually have learned the ways that most times the books say to do it, like set aside a day and be by yourself and have a quiet and have a journal. It's like, nicely bound, is actually not how I process information at all. I am externally stimulated in the way that I think and find new ideas. And so I used to try to do that, and I would just be like, I hated those days. I'd kind of avoid them. I'd move them off my calendar, and I had this weird expectation that I was supposed to walk out with some like, Jesus Christ superstar moment, and it's just never worked for me. And so what I've learned, a lot of times it's like going to conferences or putting myself into environments that are completely new, and that stimulates my mind and synapses in a way that nothing is familiar, so I'm paying attention to everything. And that's kind of how I step back, decompress. As an externalizer and an extrovert, it's actually to put myself in really new experiences, I find my brain opens up in really interesting ways.
I haven't heard that before. I love that because I'm an extrovert as well. And I've been feeling it through this whole COVID thing.
Yeah. Oh man.
Not being out and seeing people and engaging and being a speaker too. I love going to events. So Tiffany, thanks for sharing your journey here on Growth Think Tank. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Fantastic interview. Being fully transparent takes courage. Being fully transparent is something that I believe you should consider, because when you want to create more trust, you want to create more loyalty across the company, you want to make sure that people feel connected to you as a leader. Being fully transparent allows them to feel that connection. Because here's the reality. If you don't share with them what's really going on or what the numbers really are, they'll make it up in their mind. And so I think it's better to put it out there, to have conversations, to teach them and train them, and to educate them on exactly what these things mean so that they can understand their place inside of it. All that being said, being fully transparent is a powerful way to be a leader. Now, when you think about your leadership, you're evolving right now. You've got to think about how you want to grow and how you want to be seen. What is your next step? I can help you get clear with that. I call this a clarity call. I know, ingenious, right? But when you think about who you are and where you're going, sometimes it helps to talk to someone else to get a perspective to allow you to get absolutely crystal clear. So reach out to me, gene@genehammett.com. That's my email address. I'd love to get to know you, help you with a clarity call. Absolutely free. Love to get to know you if you're listening to this episode this deep into it. When you think about leadership and you think about growth, think of Growth Think Tank. As always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.